Today, Donald Trump labels Volodymyr Zelenskiy a dictator as their feud deepens.
A new Reuters Ipsos poll shows that Americans are worried about the impact of Elon Musk's cuts to the federal government.
And Trump's media company sues the Brazilian judge presiding over the Bolsonaro coup case.
It's Thursday, February 20th. This is Reuters World News, bringing you everything you need to know from the front lines in 10 minutes, every weekday. I'm Christopher Waljesper in Chicago.
And I'm Tara Oakes in Liverpool.
Europe has failed to bring peace, and Zelensky probably wants to keep the gravy train going. I don't know what's the problem. But
a major flip in US policy. President Donald Trump doubling down on his criticism of Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskiy, accusing Zelensky of being a dictator. Tensions between the two have intensified this week after US talks with Russia in Saudi Arabia. As for Zelensky, he accused Trump of living in a disinformation space. Trump saying in response that the Ukrainian leader has done a terrible job and could have attended the talks in Saudi Arabia if he'd wanted to. Max Hunder is in Kyiv and has been giving us a reaction from Ukraine.
Well, ordinary Ukrainians are quite shocked and flabbergasted at what they've seen from President Trump. There's been some anger on social media, a lot of dismay. Everyone's quite depressed about what this means for the future. Zelensky did sort of fire back a bit, and then that actually escalated this war of words. But I would point out that actually this spat has really caused Ukrainians in general to rally around Zelensky. There's actually a stronger measure of domestic cohesion and unity than there was before this spat started as people rally around their leader at this difficult time. The latest poll that actually was released on Wednesday said they had 57% trust.
So how does this impact the war?
The actual tangible processes are still the same as they were before the spat. This is so far just a spat. Of course, I'd remind you that Biden-era aid packages are still trickling in, but also it's wrong to see Ukraine as helpless without foreign support. Ukraine's grown a pretty massive domestic arms industry for a country of its size throughout the war, and it can meet some of its arms demands by itself. And obviously, the Europeans seem to have been somewhat jolted awake by Trump's actions and statements over the past week and a half. However, the US is still the largest single military backer, and it supplies a lot of key systems and weapons, which it would be hard, very hard, sometimes impossible to adequately replace. And unfortunately for Ukraine, if it does lose US political and military support, that would, I think, inevitably lead to significantly higher Ukrainian casualties on the battlefield.
One of the causes of attention is what to do with Ukraine's supply of critical minerals, with Zelensky rejecting a US proposal for a minerals deal and saying Ukraine is not for sale. But what are critical minerals, and why is what Ukraine has so valuable? You can find out on this week's episode of Econ World Podcast. It's available now. Red Cross vehicles surrounded by a crowd and members of Hamas, carrying the bodies of Israeli infant Kfir Bibas and his 4-year-old brother Ariel from Gaza. They are the 2 youngest captives taken by Hamas in the October 7th attack. Their bodies and that of their mother were handed over today, along with the 4th hostage, a dead Lifshit. It's the first time Israel has received the bodies of hostages as part of a ceasefire agreement. Pope Francis is alert and responsive and making jokes. That's what Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni said after visiting him in hospital. The Vatican says the 88-year-old has shown a slight improvement in recent blood tests as he battles double pneumonia.
NASA's plans to return to the moon are less certain as 4 key senior officials close to its Artemis moon program leave the space agency. President Trump, as well as Elon Musk, whose company SpaceX has $15 billion worth of contracts with NASA, have been advocating for shelving the Artemis program in favor of a Mars mission. The Democratic Republic of Congo is asking for military and diplomatic support from Chad. It's an effort to help fight a Rwanda-backed insurgency from M23 rebels in its eastern provinces.
Gold prices have hit another record high as investors turn to bullion for safety, over fears that Trump's tariff plans would stoke inflation and a global trade war. For those keeping track, that's the 9th time the metal has touched an all-time high this year. That comes after a 27% rise last year, its strongest annual performance in over a decade. And guess what? There's an Econ World episode all about gold for you to find out more about what's happening. Take a listen wherever you get your podcasts.
A new Reuters Ipsos poll shows that a majority of Americans are worried that Elon Musk's efforts to reduce the federal government could hurt services in their communities. But the poll also shows some support for reducing the size of government, even from Democrats. Our political editor, Scott Malone, is here to break down the numbers.
So big picture, what we see is that Americans do support the idea that the federal government could be smaller, but they're showing a lot of concerns about the way this particular campaign is being run.
How so?
58% of respondents said that they're concerned that federal programs that their communities rely on, like Social Security, like student aid, could be slowed as a result of this, and that is about double the number of people who said that they aren't worried. Respondents are also concerned about the influence that billionaires and the wealthy have on the White House, with 71% saying that they believe that the wealthy have too much influence on the White House, and 69% saying that they think that the wealthy are in fact making money off their White House connections.
How's the Trump administration viewing public approval of these early actions?
Well, I mean, the Trump administration's take is that, one, that there's a need to cut costs, full stop. Broadly, that general idea the American public does agree with. 59% of respondents to our survey said that they did back the goal of downsizing the federal government. The White House does say that they believe that they have broad public support for their cost-cutting campaigns, citing Trump's election victory. So I think the disconnect we're seeing is, perhaps some concern about how the way that it's being executed right now.
Trump Media Group and a video sharing platform are suing a Brazilian Supreme Court justice, accusing him of illegal censorship. The judge in question is also the one weighing the criminal case against Trump's ally, Brazil's former president, Jair Bolsonaro. Bolsonaro has been charged by the Brazilian Supreme Court over an alleged 2022 coup plot. Rod Haynes is our bureau chief in Brazil and has been looking into both cases.
Part of the effort by Bolsonaro and his allies in Congress and internationally to discredit this case before the Supreme Court is to focus very specifically on the judge who's been overseeing the investigation and is now going to be hearing the case before the Supreme Court. And this same judge, Alexandre de Moraes, has been taking the most active role in combating what is seen as misinformation online and what is accused by a lot of conservatives in Brazil of being a censorship campaign. Now, we saw Trump Media and Rumble, another conservative social media platform, bringing a lawsuit in a federal district court in Tampa, specifically suing this Brazilian Supreme Court Justice, Alexandre de Moraes. Now, there's no explicit signs of coordination, but you just saw Moraes receive charges before the Supreme Court, and it was not 12 hours later, we had a lawsuit from Trump Media and other conservative allies of Bolsonaro targeting that same Supreme Court justice in a U.S. lawsuit.
Brazil's Supreme Court and Moraes' office did not immediately respond to requests for comment. Last year, Justice Moraes was locked in a months-long feud with Elon Musk. He was the one who led the Supreme Court decision that temporarily suspended Musk-owned X in Brazil over the social media platform's failure to comply with court rulings. For our recommended read today, we focus on eggs and how Turkey is exporting 15,000 tons of them to the US to ease disruption caused by the bird flu outbreak. You can find out more by following the link in the pod description.
For more on any of the stories from today, check out Reuters.com or the Reuters app. Don't forget to follow us on your favorite podcast player. We'll be back tomorrow with our daily headline show.